Good evening. It's still August 5th, Wednesday, 6:22 p.m. And today has been a roller coaster of a day. Let's look at the latest numbers, the latest news, and my latest reports. Let's see. So for today, the world is approaching that 300,000 new cases per day. We are 270,000 for today. USA has 55,000 new cases. Brazil has 54,000 new cases. India has 56,000 new cases. And in fourth place, Russia with 5,000 cases. If we look at top deaths for the day, number one is Brazil, 1,322. USA number two, 1,311. India third with 919. Mexico fourth, 857. So you see that the deaths it's getting worse and worse and worse. Let's see. Now, if all you remember back in February, they had the boat, the Diamond Princess, that was infected. They kind of just left that under the dark. They don't report on it anymore. I was wondering where it's at, but it's no info on it. And they're probably just covering it up because that would have been a really good example to study the virus by studying the spread that happened in a boat way back in February. Now we look USA, we'll go state by state. USA approaching 5 million cases. Texas, number one with new cases, 9,000 new cases. California, second with 5,000 new cases. Florida, third, 5,000 new cases. Georgia, fourth, 3,700 cases. In terms of deaths, Florida is number one with 225. Texas, number two, 220. California, number three, 169. Arizona, fourth, 87. Now keep in mind, these numbers are sketchy. Testing is falling apart. They're hiding deaths. They're manipulating data. And they're exploiting backlogs to report as much as they want to report. So keep in mind that at this point, we have to take Worldometer with a grain of salt. With a grain of salt. And we're about to hit 19 million cases, approaching 20. Deaths getting close to the million. I mean, let's be honest. Cases are way past a million now. And you can imagine the panic once the media reports a million SARS-2 deaths, when we already hit that a long time ago. Cases would not surprise me. Will not surprise me if we are already past 100 million. Would not surprise me at all. It's just so many inaccuracies. It's just so much inaccuracy and cover up going on that it just, it begs the question. What really are the numbers? The daily cases, the graph, as I said before, it's emerging into one giant wave, meaning that the world is barely on its first wave. It's barely starting. This pandemic's not gonna go anywhere. The death graph is already merging into one humongous first wave graph of deaths, and that's the reality of it. This is the reality of the situation. And as I said before, you gotta look at things the way they are, not the way you want to see them. And we have to also hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable in their crime of covering up the virus since December. It is because of their cover-up, it is because of their assassinations and disappearance of journalists and doctors and others that this pandemic was allowed to go out. It is because they manipulated it and because they made the WHO lie to the world and say that it wasn't human-to-human contact when it is, that it wasn't a pandemic when it already was, and for just using the WHO as a dog on a leash to just lie to the world. China, the Chinese Communist Party literally published fake data on the virus and influenced the world of science by limiting the studies that were coming out. The reason why so many scientists are confused about the virus right now is because the Chinese Communist Party blocked the scientists that were trying to expose the virus way back in January. So they must be held accountable, and they must be called out, and they must be taken down. We'll do news. So for today's news, if it will let me get to it. So only 2.5% of Italians may have antibodies against SARS-2. 2.5%. Is California undercounting SARS-2 deaths? Major tech glitch hampering data collection. Efforts to track SARS-2 cases has been seriously hampered by a technical issue affecting the electronic data system used by state and local health departments. Really, I'm gonna blame it on a glitch. I've heard that many times before, many times before, and it's not just the CCP. The American government is also deliberately lying and falsifying, manipulating data. Practically every single corrupt government in the world is lying about this virus. So it's not just the CCP; it's just American government. Brazil's government is just it's really bad. It's really bad. De Blasio announces SARS-2 quarantine checkpoints at major entry points into New York City. Day visitors will be reminded that it is required, not optional, De Blasio said on Wednesday. This is serious stuff. If we're going to hold it at this level, the quarantine is going to have to be enforced. And I'm tired of hearing people saying that New York is over, that New York is New Zealand, and New York has beaten the virus. You cannot beat the virus until you prevent a second wave. And New York is still getting new cases. People are still dying in New York. And it's just incredible. New York hasn't beaten the virus. It's nowhere near beating the virus. No one is beating the virus. UConn becomes first FBS team to cancel football season because of SARS-2. UConn, which last month officially left the American Athletic Conference, announced Wednesday that it is suspending its football program for the 2020 season because of the SARS-2 pandemic. Sports in America is showing you to what extent the U.S. will sacrifice its own players to keep them playing, to keep the money flowing. We have sports players being threatened to shut up about the virus and to keep playing, regardless whether they get infected or not, because the industry just wants to keep pumping money out of them, regardless of what happens to the players. Regardless, Mississippi's governor just mandated masks in public gatherings and school. The state is top 5 for SARS-2 cases per capita. SARS-2 contact tracing anecdotes have 50 Ohio bars associated with outbreaks since July 1. 50 bars in one state, in one country, had outbreaks of the virus. And that's only what contact tracers were able to find, because most people don't cooperate with contact tracers. So we know for sure it's beyond 50. And that's not even including family gatherings, parties, graduation parties, friends hanging out doing other things, block parties. This is one giant comedy. It's one giant comedy full of clowns. Clorox wipes shortage expected to continue until 2021 as SARS-2 drives demand. New Orleans, a handful of Jefferson Parish school teachers have tested positive for SARS-2 since returning to their classrooms Monday to prepare for the opening of in-class instruction next week. Yeah, schools are getting hit very hard. And we already knew. South Africa was the example of what happens when you don't shut down the schools. They had outbreaks all over the place. Hundreds of teachers infected. Hundreds of students infected. Deaths. It was obvious. And South Africa has just barely shut down the schools. And now what's happening there is happening all over the world. You have many schools in America getting infections on the first day. You have teachers quitting because they're fearful of their lives. Because a lot of teachers are, they're older and they're at risk. They're in that group. I mean, we're gonna start hearing people dying because they caught it at school. We're gonna start hearing school bus outbreaks. It's gonna get bad. It's gonna get really bad. Texas, the cost of SARS-2. Houston families face tens of thousands in bills after loved ones die. My heart goes out to everybody who has lost a loved one from this virus, who had a mom or a dad or a brother who died scared. In ICU, it's real brutal. It's real brutal. And to be stuck with bills, that's ridiculous. And not to mention funeral costs, all those things. There's just so much pain, misery, and death. And a lot of these people who are going into mental hospitals because they can't bear the death of their parent, the death of their loved ones, People are going into mental hospitals because they've lost all their money. They've lost their homes. They lost a will to live. You know, it's harsh trying to grasp what this virus has done to the world. Thanks because of countries, not countries, but thanks to like the CCP for allowing this to happen, and the other governments that collaborated and covered it up. I mean, I think nobody's really looking into just what it's doing to people. We have entire families getting infected, several hospitalized, many died. I can't even begin to tell you just how many videos I've seen of people screaming and crying because their loved ones are dying of the virus, and the hospitals are refusing service. People who are hoarding their dead loved ones in their houses because the hospitals won't come and pick them up. People who have resorted to carrying the dead bodies of their families and dumping them in other neighborhoods because nobody wants to help them. People who are dumping bodies in the ocean because nobody wants to pick up the bodies. It's ridiculous. There's cases where were in a jungle. I don't know if it was Brazil. I think it was China. They found a bunch of coffins just stacked up of dead bodies. I mean, it's just ridiculous. In Ohio, churchgoers sparked a SARS-2 outbreak that spread to more than 90 other people after he attended a service. Government Mike DeWine said, I mean, this was inevitable. We are going to see a lot of spreading happen because of the churches. I know people that, okay, look, even I, who am not that religious, can tell you, God does not give things to you for free. You don't pray to be successful. You don't pray to overcome a problem. You have to fight for what you want. And even God told people, like Moses, that if you want the land of the giants, you're gonna have to fight for it. I'm not gonna give it to you. So no, you can't pray victory. You have to fight for it yourself. Stop depending on religion to just hand things to you. That's not how it works. Even me, who is not that religious, can tell you that God is not gonna just give something to you. You have to fight for it. He said it himself in the Bible. So if I know this, it's a shocker, real. It's a shocker, but anyways, moving on. Sweden's top virologist has a message on how to defeat SARS-2. Open schools and no masks. I laughed like a hyena when I first read that. All right, so we got a couple of reports to go through before we go through. We left off with the Twilight Zone moment that happened with Peak Prosperity. I spoke about that in the previous video because people are scratching their heads with what happened with that YouTuber. CG report number 69. New York Health Commissioner resigns after clashes with mayor over virus. I leave my post today with deep disappointment that during the most critical public health crisis in our lifetime, that the health department's incomparable disease control expertise was not used to the degree it could have been, Dr. Bartlett said in a resignation email sent to Mr. de Blasio. She said, our experts are world renowned for their epidemiology, surveillance, and response work. The city would be well served by having them at the strategic center of the response, not in the background. Former officials said the mayor should have listened. She revealed the mayor deliberately shifted the contact tracing teams from experienced to inexperienced teams. In May, a New York Post article told a conflict between Dr. Bartlett and a police commander who wanted PPE that had been set aside for health workers to be given instead to the police. Bartlett said, I don't give two rat's asses about your cops. New York City's health department is regarded as one of the best municipal health agencies in the world. But during the epidemic, the mayor has repeatedly ignored advice of its top disease control experts and sidelined the department. Mr. de Blasio said Friday that a given school building could close, in some cases for 14 days, when 2 positive cases emerged and were not linked to the same classroom. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the schools all get shut down again, because it's just, we're seeing too many outbreaks already in the schools. and they've barely even reopened. Perhaps the most consequential debate inside City Hall over SARS-2 came during the second week in March. The city had a small number of positive cases, but its public health system was flashing a warning about the unchecked spread of flu-like virus. Dr. Bartlett and one of her top deputies began urging more restrictions on gatherings. Mr. de Blasio, for a time, sided instead with Dr. Katz, who had been advising City Hall against ordering shutdowns. Some officials inside the health department talked about quitting that week or staging a walkout to force action. I remember that. They had to literally force the mayor to do the shutdown. It's ridiculous. We will, and then this is what I've been talking about with the schools. CUG report number 71. Corona Chan starts classes in America edition. Two suburban Atlanta school districts that began in-person classes Monday with mask-optional policies face more questions about SARS-2 safety protocols after on-campus pictures show students packed shoulder to shoulder. The day after school resumed, one school announced a second grader tested positive for SARS-2, forcing the child's teacher and classmates to be sent home to quarantine for 2 weeks. In Paulding County, student pictures taken Monday and Tuesday show crowded hallways at North Paulding High School in Dallas. Fewer than half of the students shown wearing masks. Now, as a side note, on these schools' Instagrams, they're deleting these pictures because they're getting a lot of backlash, as they should. Atta defended the district's decision not to require masks, writing that wearing a mask is a personal choice, and there is no practical way to enforce a mandate to wear them. At least one North Paulding football player tested positive for SARS-2 in recent days, among hundreds of Georgia athletes confirmed with infections. Yeah, college sports is doomed. I don't know if you've gotten that memo yet. They are very, very doomed. It's not a good time right now to try to be an athlete. Very, very, very bad time right now. Jacoby wrote that the district continues to strongly encourage and recommend that all students social distance, and when they cannot, that they wear masks inside the school and on buses. It's just a matter of time before you start hearing about school bus outbreaks. As I was saying before. Cherokee County officials later announced a student at 60s Elementary School near Kenton tested positive for the virus. The child's teacher and 20 other students were sent home to quarantine and learn online for 14 days. Superintendent Brian Hightower had already provoked ire among some teachers with a Friday email that some interpreted as suggesting they resign if they had SARS-2 concerns. And now I'm going to post the warning that is going to go out to the whole world based upon what's happening in Italy. This is what's to come after the massive wave hits your country. CUG report number 70. Italy goes from a pandemic of SARS-2 to a pandemic of psychiatric disorders. A study from a hospital in Milan, Italy, has uncovered another complication to the process of recovering from the new coronavirus. More than half of patients surveyed 1 month after their treatment had developed a psychiatric disorder. The study, published in Brain Behavior and Immunity on Thursday, found that 55% of former patients surveyed experienced either post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety, depression, insomnia, or obsessive-compulsive OC symptoms. A month after treatment, the patients were interviewed and given questionnaires to assess their mental health. After 3 weeks of treatments, I was healing from COVID at home, had no fever, and just a little cough, one of the patients surveyed for the study said. But sometimes at night, my breath could go away all of a sudden, making me feel as if I was to die. I knew what it was because I had suffered from panic attacks in the past. I stayed there out in the balcony for hours, trying to put fresh air into my lungs. It was terrible. Panic made me suffer more than COVID. The researchers were not surprised by the results because previous studies of other coronaviruses had turned up increased mental health problems in survivors. For example, 10 to 35% of those who recover from SARS have experienced psychiatric symptoms. Research suggests a link between immune-triggered inflammation and mental illness. They said their findings warranted more investigation into the link between the pandemic and mental health issues. Public health experts have already warned about a second pandemic of psychological disorders. So it's not just about the deaths, and it's not just about the deaths anymore. It's about the survivors. The long haulers, the people who have not been able to get rid of this virus for months. SARS-1 already showed us that people had it for life and are still suffering from it. SARS-2 would not surprise me if it's doing the same thing. So it's no longer a topic of deaths. It's whether people who survive it are going to have healthy lives or not. So the situation just continues to just grow grim. Well, anyhow, thank you for listening. It's Tuesday, so the wild week begins with, well, it's Wednesday, so it's already begun. Well, anyways, thanks for showing. Please share the video if you can. Any questions, feel free to ask. Check out the Pastebins for the previous reports, previous news, and thank you for listening.